If you're looking for a new hobby, might I suggest model railroading. The size of the train cars can range from a matchbox all the way up to this thing here, which is G-scale. The G in G-scale actually means garden. What this means is you can build the track outdoors. Just one track layout can take several thousand square feet. If you don't have that kind of property, like I don't, might I suggest doing what I did? I built an indoor layout inside my house. It's mounted directly below the ceiling, so you don't actually lose any usable floor space. I actually made this video after the track was already built. Since it took me a few years to build it, that actually would have been a pretty long video. So instead, I'll tell you how it was built, and tell you things that really worked out well for me. So if you wish, you can incorporate them into your railroad track. Before I get started, let's see what it would be like to ride on my railroad, if you were only 3 inches tall. Let's talk about how to make an indoor railroad track. The track bed will be cut out of plywood. You'll want to use screws to attach the track to the plywood. This will keep it from moving as the train's going across it, especially around corners. On the bottom side of the plywood, attach furring strips to the outside edges to give it support. Now in straight runs, it's easy to put a straight furring strip on. But when you're going around corners, that's something else altogether. What I did is I took the straight wood and I cut it into 1/8 inch thick pieces. These are easily bendable. Take 4 pieces of wood, apply slow setting glue, sandwich them together, bend them, then clamp them into place. In a couple hours after the glue's dried, remove your clamps and you have a bent piece of wood. If you did a good clamping job, the result will look like one solid piece of wood. But if you have a bad clamping job, you'll see lines where the wood actually separated. So make sure you do a good clamping job. After the furring strip is installed, then you can hide the plywood edge by using a nice piece of oak trim. If you can't attach the track to the wall, you'll need to build a suspension bridge. This can be accomplished by building braces underneath. The braces stick out beyond the railroad bed. While you're building these, consider this option. Make room to install a rope light. The rope light will significantly enhance the railroad, as well as provide an outstanding source of indirect lighting for your house. Drill holes on the outside corners of your supports, and I found copper wire makes very good support line. It's easy to route and twist, it looks good, and will support quite a bit of weight. Route the wire straight up to the ceiling. Here I attached them to 30-pound drywall anchors. So in theory, each support can hold 60 pounds. This bridge has 12 supports, so the math says it can hold 720 pounds. Well, math is fine, but let's not put that much weight on it. The whole train weighs about 40 pounds, so that's a pretty good safety margin. While cutting your plywood, you'll run into a couple challenges. The first one is, most houses don't have square walls. So to make unique shapes like this, first I used thin cardboard and a knife and made a template. Trim as required. Then transfer that across to your plywood and cut the plywood out. The next challenge, railroads have a maximum turn radius. This will depend on things like what type of railroad you're putting up there and what's the length of the cars you're using. So plan ahead before you get started to see if this is even feasible in your house. While standing directly underneath it, this track bed looks quite large. But in reality, when viewed from the room, it's actually not that noticeable. Let's consider some other construction technique tips. As you cut each section of track bed out, they will need to be attached to each other. I used wood brackets. Your wall supports can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make them. But make sure to include enough supports to hold the weight of the train. In addition to using suspension cables to cross large open areas, you'll also want to use them on the inside corners of your turns. This will allow you to reduce the size of the support brackets underneath. And if you have to cross an open doorway, might I suggest building yourself a railroad bridge. But if you bring the chop saw inside to build it, don't make the mistake I did. Have all the sawdust cleaned up before your wife comes home. Now let's talk safety. My locomotive is a chunk of steel that weighs 10 pounds. You really don't want 10 pounds of steel crossing over someone's head without a little bit of thought. This is where guardrails come into play. I put guardrails any place a person could stand under it, and on all outside corners. The guardrail consists of oak posts attached to the plywood, holes drilled into the posts, and more copper wire. After you've completed construction, start decorating, like these mountains. And the last topic I'd like to talk about. Sometimes your railroad will be visited by an irresistible force of nature. If you have giant felines in the house, they'll feel you just built them their own personal jungle gym. So just keep in mind, there will be some maintenance involved after you finish this project. When your track is exposed to the local wildlife, or just the air in the house, you will have to periodically clean it. I use this metal polish on both the track and the copper wire. This is how much dirt I pull off of 4 feet of track about every 6 months. You can skip this step if you're lucky enough to have a battery-operated engine with a remote control. If you've made it this far into the video, you must really be a train enthusiast. So let's finish up with a bonus round, riding the train at night. Oh, and check out the rope lighting.